The air inside the crystalline ballroom of the Grand Elia was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the even more expensive musk of old money. It was the kind of gala where the champagne cost more than a year's rent in the city below, and the guests wore their pedigrees like emerald. Julian Vane, a man whose ego was as inflated as his stock portfolio, stood at the center of a circle of admirers. He was the CEO of Vane Global, a man used to being the loudest voice in any room. When Maya walked in, the room didn't stop. She wasn't wearing a gown that cost $50,000, nor was she dripping in inherited diamonds. She wore a sharp, tailored black suit that fit her like a second skin, her hair styled in a neat, professional crown of braids. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a ballroom, which was exactly why Julian targeted her. He thrived on asserting dominance over those he deemed out of place. The confrontation happened near the fountain. Julian, flushed with burden and the arrogance of a 3-year winning streak, intercepted Maya as she reached for a glass of water. "A little lost, aren't we, sweetheart?" Julian's voice boomed, intentionally drawing the attention of the surrounding socialites. "The catering staff entrance is in the bag. Though, I must say, you've got a lot of nerve walking through the front door looking like you're ready to audit the place." Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look down at her shoes or stutter a confused apology. She simply took a sip of her water and looked Julian directly in the eye. Her gaze was calm, almost unnervingly still. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Mr. Vane," she said, her voice low and steady. "And I would suggest you lower your tone. You're making a scene that you likely regret by tomorrow morning." Julian threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that prompted a ripple of snickers from the crowd. Phones began to slide out of pockets. The vultures of high society smelled a viral moment. "Regret? Do you even know who I am? I own half the skyline you see out those windows. I am Vane Global. And you look like someone's overworked assistant who stole a VIP pass." He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive cigars. "Tell me, who do you think you're talking to?" Maya set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray. The silence that followed was heavy. She stepped into Julian's personal space, not with aggression, but with the quiet authority of a predator that didn't need to roar. "I know exactly who you are, Julian," she whispered, though in the hushed room, her words carried. "But it seems you have no idea who I am. You should probably start getting used to the fact that I'm your boss." For a second, the room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Then, Julian erupted. It wasn't just a laugh, it was a mocking, hysterical bray. He turned to the crowd, gesturing wildly at Maya. "Did you hear that? This child thinks she's my boss. I didn't know the board started hiring interns to run the empire." The sneers from the crowd were shut. People whispered about delusions of grandeur and the audacity of youth. Julian was enjoying himself, riding the wave of public humiliation he was inflicting on her. He felt invincible. He felt like the king of the mountain. But while Julian laughed, a group of men and women in dark, charcoal suits began to filter through the crowd. They weren't laughing. They weren't holding champagne. They were holding leather-bound folders and tablet devices that glowed with urgent notifications. These were the members of the Global Oversight Board, the invisible hand that actually moved the pieces on the corporate chessboard. The chairman of the board, Arthur Sterling, a man whose family had defined the industry for a century, stepped forward. He didn't look at Julian. He walked straight to Maya and bowed his head slightly in a gesture of profound respect. "The documents have been finalized, ma'am," Sterling said, his voice cutting through Julian's fading laughter like a knife. "The restructuring is complete. The majority share has been transferred, and the board has voted unanimously." Julian's face went from a deep, mocking red to a ghostly, ashen grey. "Arthur? What is this? What are you talking about?" This girl, Sterling interrupted, his voice dripping with icy disdain, "is Dr. Maya Vance. She is the founder of the Horizon Group, which, as of 20 minutes ago, has completed a hostile takeover of Vane Global. She owns 51% of your company, Julian. Which means she doesn't just work here. She owns you." The phones that were recording for life were now recording a historic downfall. The hidden documents Maya had mentioned weren't a bluff. They were the result of 2 years of quiet, meticulous brilliance. While Julian was busy appearing on magazine covers and belittling his staff, Maya had been building a silent empire, buying up debt, winning over disgruntled shareholders, and proving that the quiet resilience Julian mocked was actually a tactical masterclass. Maya stepped toward Julian one last time. He looked smaller now, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume that didn't fit. "You spend so much time looking down at people, Julian, that you forgot to look up," Maya said. She didn't sound angry, she sounded disappointed. You saw a black woman in a suit and assumed I was a mistake. You assumed I was beneath you because your world is built on the idea that people like me don't belong at the top. But the world is changing. And today, I'm the change. She turned to Sterling. Clear out his office by Monday. I want a full audit of his discretionary spending over the last 5 years. If there's so much as a missing paperclip, I want it reported. Ma walked away then, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. There was no more sneering, no more mocking whispers. There was only the stunned silence of people realizing they had just witnessed the end of one era and the beginning of another. Behind her, Julian Vane stood alone in the center of the ballroom, a millionaire who had just realized that money couldn't buy him out of the truth. The girl he had laughed at was now the woman who held his